Plans for a new Golden Fleet of warships has been announced by President Donald Trump, and this will see the creation of Trump-class battleships, which are 100 times more powerful than previous American warships. On another topic, the Trump administration has been offering $1,000 and a free airplane flight anywhere but here for any illegal aliens wanting to self-deport, and until the end of the year, they're now tripling the offer. Meanwhile, it looks like President Donald Trump is making a comeback in the polls, which is a big deal with the affordability debate. We talked about these topics and a lot more today, so make sure to give this podcast a like. It helps us a lot. I'm the Epoch Times senior investigative reporter Joshua Phillip, and you're listening to Crossroads. All right, first of all, plans for these new warships. The Golden Fleet. Donald Trump made the announcement, and it's going to see the creation of Trump-class battleships, which have lasers to take down even hypersonic missiles, allegedly, electronic warfare systems for anti-drone technologies, and a lot of other things. These are going to be, as you mentioned, 100 times more powerful than previous American warships. And the move also comes amid, well, the United States having lost most of its systems for wartime production. And also, this is happening amid a new push for factories to come back to the United States, especially for like maritime production, in the face of China and the Chinese Communist Party doing a lot on that front. Now, this is President Donald Trump making the announcement.
As Commander-in-Chief, it's my great honor to announce that I have approved a plan for the Navy to begin the construction of two brand new, very large, the largest we've ever built, battleships. You know, you used to build the Iowa, the Missouri, the Wisconsin, the Alabama, many others. We had big battleships. These are bigger, but they will have 100 times they'll be 100 times the force, the power, and there's never been anything like these ships. These have been under design consideration for a long time, and it started with me in my first term, because I said, why aren't we doing battleships like we used to? And these are the best in the world. They'll be the fastest, the biggest, and by far 100 times more powerful than any battleship ever built. So if you look at the Iowa, the Missouri, Wisconsin, Alabama, and others, but they were similar in size, some a little bit bigger than the others. But if you take the biggest one, it's 100 times more powerful. They're longer by a little bit, but and they're bigger. They're bigger ships, but they hold much more. They use the word lethality.
Okay, so what do these ships actually look like? This is a bit more of the actual concept for these new battleships from the U.S. Navy Institute News. And it says this: the U.S. Navy will buy 2 new battleships as part of the Golden Fleet effort. President Donald Trump, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and Navy Secretary John Fallon announced Monday at Mar-a-Lago. And it said Trump said the Navy will start by purchasing 2 ships and eventually purchase 10 with the goal of 20 to 25 in total for the class, these Trump class ones, with a start of construction planned for 2030. Some would argue that's it's a bit far out for a potential war with China, but 2030 is actually not that far away. It's almost 2026, so this is coming up quick. On that front, too, this is not just like a Trump plan. America, even under previous administrations, it's been known that we need to build more warships. Building 2 is not a huge deal. Before then, the idea of getting 2025 in total by, again, 2030 is a big deal, too. It says this, though. This is according to Trump. It says the U.S. Navy will lead the design along with me because I'm a very aesthetic person. Suggesting, of course, look, not only are they going to be powerful, but they should look good. And Trump says he's a very aesthetic person. He wants these things to look good, right? It's the Trump class. Come on, right? Now, it says this as well. The future Trump class battleship, the first is going to be the USS Defiant, will be the largest, deadliest, and most versatile and best-looking warship anywhere in the world's oceans, according to Fallon, saying to this presentation. They seem to make a point of it's got to look real cool, you know. He adds, quote, Now there will be work for shipyards everywhere, from Philadelphia to San Diego, from Maine to Mississippi, from the Great Lakes to the Gulf Coast, and for manufacturers that will build components for this battleship in every state. Meaning, of course, that if you're going to build a battleship, you don't just build it in one place. You're going to have a lot of parts from a lot of different manufacturers across the United States. In some ways, too, the defense contract for this will pour a lot of money into that industry. And so you're going to watch that start to get built back up because, again, they're going to be doing it for the next several years. Now, notice the new platform will be more than 35,000-ton warship and draft 24 to 30 feet, according to the Navy data reviewed by USNI News. And notice that's more than double the size of the 15,000-ton Zumwalt class of destroyers, which is the largest surface combatant currently in the fleet. So these things are going to be big. And notes as well, when asked if the new ship class is meant to counter China, Trump said, quote, "It's to counter everybody. It's not China," he says. Also notes the new ship will replace the Navy's next generation DDG-X program, which was projected to be about half the size of this proposed battleship. This thing's massive, in other words. It notes as well the construction is slated to begin in the early 2030s, with the Navy serving as the lead design agent and Trump for the effort, according to USNI News, their understanding. And it's the Navy first unveiled the DDG-X concept in 2022, and like the DDG-X program, the new ships will feature existing combat systems and weapons in use on the Flight 3 Arleigh-Burke DDG-51 guided missile destroyers. It also will field the AN/SYP-6 air search radar, also vertical launch system cells, conventional prompt strike long-range hypersonic missiles, and 5-inch guns. Two sources noted the plans told USNI News. And the design will also leave margin to add additional weapons, included, get this, directed energy, which in my opinion is going to be really the future of a lot of weapon systems. Why do directed energy weapons work and why are they important? Directed energy weapons can basically nullify any kind of massive threat from drones. In fact, not even drones, but even enemy jets, even airplanes. Anything roughly below fifth generation, even kind of 4.5 generation fighter jets can basically be fried using directed energy weapons. And so the threats of drone warfare, even the threats, for example, of hypersonic missiles, Trump talked about this briefly, these can all be nullified with certain forms of directed energy weapons. There are also ways to weaponize them, such as microwave weapons, other things of that sort. I don't know if that's what they're talking about here, but there are weapon class forms of directed energy. It's not clear what they're talking about, whether it's electronic warfare weapons, things to fry enemy ships, or things to actually be able to kill. It would all be encompassed within that. It notes as well the nuclear-armed sea-launched cruise missile and potentially a 32 megajoule railgun, according to the Navy data. In other words, this thing's going to have like futuristic weapons on it, things that can pretty much annihilate basically anything. It notes as well that like the initial DDG-X concept, Defiant, again the name of the first Trump-class battleship they're making, would use gas turbines and diesel to drive an electric grid that would supply power to the ship's weapon systems and sensors, according to Navy data. The ship would also be capable of speeds in excess of 30 knots. The flight deck and hangar will be capable of fielding V-22 Osprey tilt rotors and the next generation vertical lift aircraft. On that front, a lot of these ships are used to field, like battleships of this type are not really used to like carry large troop formations. Typically, you're going to have like special operations forces on board, and they're going to launch operations from them. Any kind of larger operation would be on like other ships. Now, let me show you a bit more on this. This is another concept of one of the photos. You can see the Trump image on there, right? The Trump class. Actually, on that point, I actually once got a private tour of one of the U.S. battleships similar to this one. There's one in San Diego, right near Coronado, that is, or at least was, as to now, the most advanced warship in the U.S. military's arsenal. I got an interesting tour of it one time, and they're very interesting. So when you go into these, they have electronic warfare systems built into the ship. You actually have to leave your phone outside if the ship detects a foreign device, it will automatically destroy them. So they have really cool like electronic warfare systems built into it. You go inside, they have special operations forces command centers on board. Again, a lot of these are used for those types of operations, and again, really advanced weaponry. Something was told to me as well. This is not as well known, but basically since the Clinton administration, the American military has not really placed proper shielding on most of its warships. And the reason for that is because, at that time, it was believed any future major conflict that would be capable of destroying warships would be nuclear. And the concept was, look, well, why are we going to spend money to put proper shielding on our ships when the only nations that would be able to threaten a destroyer or an aircraft carrier would be nuclear capable countries? And so they didn't really bother putting proper armor on these things. It's not clear whether this thing's going to be properly armored. A lot of warfare is going not to larger, but instead to smaller. Smaller, cheaper is kind of the new name of the game. The US military is doing that. They're having massive like drone fleet technologies now. What's important with this type of battleship, though, is, at least in my opinion, the electronic warfare systems. Most future warfare, my personal take, is going to be directed energy. That will be able to nullify, just utterly destroy any kind of mass drone formations. And also, frankly, fry or nullify any kind of enemy warship or jet or whatever that's not hardened against electronic warfare, which frankly is most of them. There are not many countries in the world that can produce military vehicles that are hardened against electronic warfare weapons. Especially, again, EMP, right? Directed energy EMP, electromagnetic pulse. And so, whether it's fighter jets, whether it's basically anything, they're not going to be able to stand up to something like this. On that point, too, a lot of people say, well, doesn't China have fifth generation fighter jets? They have the J-20 and they have newer concepts. But everybody, okay, I've been I wrote about defense for many, many years. I was one of the main editors on that for a long time at the Epoch Times. And I've been covering this very extensively for a very long time. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors when it comes to wartime production and concepts and things like that. A lot of what you see public is not what's actually happening when it comes to defense production, especially with other countries. Sometimes countries release plans just to mess with their adversaries' heads. And especially the United States, because what happens if China releases some new concept, the American military it's business. For us, it's private business. They'll immediately start building countermeasures to whatever random proposal the CCP claims they have. Same with every other country. Most countries do this to an extent. They release things, sometimes leak things, with the intent of messing with other people's heads and to make them make false preparations for things that are never going to happen. It's very common in the kind of underworld of defense. Not to say this is fake in any way, but my point is with the Chinese J-20 and fifth generation fighter jets, the Chinese Communist Party's fifth generation fighter jet is modeled after a 4.5 generation Soviet model that's not capable of stealth. It doesn't have basically anything that would qualify it as a proper fifth generation fighter jet. It's a lot of smoke and mirrors and a lot of stupid journalists who don't know what they're talking about. And that's how the story on that kind of perpetuates. My point in saying this is it would not be able to be fielded properly against something that has decent electronic warfare capabilities. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors when it comes to military stuff. Now, look, on another topic, the Trump administration has been offering $1,000 and a free airplane ticket. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here for any illegal alien wanting to self-deport. And until the end of the year, they're now tripling the offer, $3,000. The Independent said this. They say the Trump administration has significantly increased its financial incentive for migrants to voluntarily leave the United States, tripling the self-deportation stipend to $3,000. It says the Department of Homeland Security announced on Monday that individuals residing in the U.S. without legal status could receive this payment alongside a free flight to their home countries. Wow, wish I could go. No, it's if they agreed to depart by the end of the year. It notes as well that DHS Secretary Kristi Noem issued a stark warning stating, quote, illegal aliens should take advantage of this gift and self-deport, because if they don't, we will find them, we will arrest them, and they will never return. On that point, by the way, the penalty of being deported versus self-deporting is pretty significant these days. They're making it now where if you get deported, right? If you lose the game of hide and seek, right? and you don't come out of hiding and say, hey, give me that $3,000. If you lose the game of hide and seek, not only do they deport you, they fine you retroactively for every day you've been here, which can amount to a lot of money. You lose your assets. So if you have assets, you can lose a lot of stuff, at least a lot of it. And you can also never come back, which is pretty severe. If you have built a home here, if you have family here, if you have kids here, the prospect of being deported and never being able to come back is pretty severe. And so for people who are illegal aliens, you can kind of hedge your bets, I guess. You can say, catch me if you can. But also there's the chance that in future administrations, maybe they'll change it. I mean, who knows? It's a bit of a gamble. But right now, the punishment for being caught is actually pretty significant. So a lot of people are self-deporting. In fact, as of right now, more people are self-deporting than are being deported. Now, it notes as well, the initiative follows the launch of the rebranded CBP Home app, which again used to be the free application to enter the United States. They now rebranded it, remade it to self-deport. It notes it's designed to streamline the self-deportation process. Now, again, remember, it used to be called CBP-1, and if you were residing in basically any country on earth, you could download CBP-1 and literally schedule a time to illegally enter the United States. The United States under the Biden administration had a massive open-door policy to mass migration, to the extent that Americans were using your tax dollars, funding flights, flying them in, allowing them in mass, and so on. I've reported on this extensively before. A large chunk of that program went through a United Nations agreement that the United States is part of, or at least was. We'll see if Trump took us out of it his first term. Biden brought us back in. Trump took us out again. It's called the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration. That's the exact name for the program, run by the United Nations. It began with a late Obama-era policy that started in New York, or at least agreement, and that agreement went to the UN later, finally signed on to by the US, Western Europe, Canada, most countries, facilitating the movement of their people to the West. And so if you're in Europe, it's the same policy running things there as in the United States. Effectively, what happens, your tax dollars go to the United Nations. The United Nations redirects that money to non-governmental organizations, NGOs, and the NGOs facilitate a lot of that in cahoots with different government programs, like right here in the US, where there was a CBP Home or CBP-1 app, now the Home app. So there was a very large taxpayer-funded system that was running the whole show. The Trump administration took some of those existing programs and just effectively reversed them. So rather than coming here, you're leaving here. And so the CBP Home app is the revised version of that. We'll see what happens too. Border Czar Tom Homan, recently at Turning Point USA in Arizona, which I was at also, he made the announcement. Remember, they were going to hire 10,000 new border agents. They're now about to effectively roll all of that out. And so you are about to watch deportation operations massively increase. And what it seems is going to happen, my personal take, given the patterns we've seen, given the kind of writing on the wall, very likely you're going to have deportation agents, ICE, whatever ones they choose to use, with an accompanying support force of National Guard and military. Because Trump is able to field the military and National Guard alongside agents because they're legally allowed to be fielded as such to protect federal agents or federal facilities. And so they can use them for security operations. They can use them to kind of bolster the effectiveness of ICE. And in some places like Los Angeles, they're already doing exactly that. Now, like in other news, though, a ruling in Pennsylvania says that police can look at your Google search data without needing a warrant. And this is a pretty big deal because it kind of goes against the Constitution. But there's a workaround for it, which is you willingly allow big tech companies to scoop up all your data. And it's a pretty big constitutional crisis, at least in my opinion. It's becoming normalized because of modern technology. Let me show you what it says here, and I'll explain it a bit more. This is Reclaim the Net. It says the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has a new definition of reasonable expectation. According to the justices, it's no longer reasonable to assume that what you type into Google is yours to keep. So don't search for anything weird on Google. They will see it. It is no longer secret. It notes in a decision that reads like a love letter to the surveillance economy, the court ruled that police were within their rights to access a convicted rapist's search history without a warrant. It notes the reasoning is that everyone knows they're being watched anyway. So you don't have privacy anyway. Why care about privacy? It says the opinion issued Tuesday leaned on the idea that the public has already surrendered its privacy to Silicon Valley. No longer exists. It says, quote, it is common knowledge that websites, internet-based applications, and internet service providers collect and then sell user data, the court said, as if mass exploitation of personal information had become a civic tradition, which it unfortunately has. It notes that because that practice is so widely known, the court concluded, users cannot reasonably expect privacy. In other words, if corporations do it first, the government gets a free pass. It notes the case traces back to a rape and home invasion investigation that had gone cold, and in a final effort, police asked Google to identify anyone who searched for the victim's address the week before the crime. Google obliged. The search came from an IP address linked to John Edward Kurtz, later convicted in the case. Again, this is a controversial issue. They catch rapists, they catch murderers, they catch potential terrorists using data that people type into search. So and even online purchases. So let's make this point, okay? The recent case where they arrested the suspect for planting the pipe bombs on January 6th. How did they catch the guy? Phone pings because of phone tracking data. Your phone, you can even buy the data actually. As a private citizen, you can buy it. But you can actually search for phone pings at key locations during set times and trace that to certain locations. Your phone ping is a traceable identifying factor. As you go about your life, your phone and your computer are recording everything. Your foot traffic data, your heart data, your health data. If you allow voice recording, it can voice record even when the device is not being actively used. You can give it camera access to certain applications, which can then access that and then record it and also sell it. Everything you type, everything you search for, your notes, your contact list, everything. So if you're chatting on your phone, if you have your phone and you're doing anything, if you search for something on your laptop, anything, all of that is being recorded. The individual on January 6th, aside from phone ping data, also had made purchases of the parts to make the pipe bombs. Those were in-person purchases, not online purchases, but that's recorded also because of the modern digital economies. So, this does carry some beneficial real-world applications. You could say, great, they can catch terrorists. Great, they can catch a guy if you're buying a little too much fertilizer. And you're not planting a garden or you're not a farmer. They might come looking for you. There are certain purchases that kind of make red flags, and there are certain online searches that set off red flags. Now, the problem you have is that while I would agree, hey, great, catch all the rapists. Fantastic. Throw them all behind bars. Wonderful. The more the merrier in prison, right? I think that's good. The problem has to do when you get into the constitutional protections against illegal searches and seizures, though. Because while you could argue that, hey, if you have nothing to hide, why do you care about privacy? It's the same argument used by countries like communist China. Why do you care about privacy if you're abiding by the law? It's because as law becomes more totalitarian, more things get scooped up. You can look at countries like in the United Kingdom, where simple online posts or even online activity can get you thrown in jail. As of right now, in fact, just as of yesterday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced that the U.S. is going to be putting even semi-sanctions, travel restrictions. They cannot come to the U.S. to European individuals who've been engaged in the censorship industrial complex, as they're calling it. So individuals in the European Union who have been active with trying to censor Americans are going to be barred from entering the United States. America is actually punishing them pretty severely right now. And they're saying it's going to keep expanding as European powers keep trying to censor Americans. The point being, everything you see and do online can and will be used against you. It was not the case previously that crimes were typically recorded all the time because of mass surveillance. In the past, it was not the case that every single text message you've ever sent, every single conversation you've had was recorded, documented. This is often used against you in your workplace. It's used against you in investigations. It's used against you if you ever get arrested. It's used against you in divorce proceedings, basically anything. And so you don't really have privacy anymore. The challenge you have with government getting that data, though, is this. So normally, if the government wants to access private information, they need to get a warrant. You've gotten the problem now of warrantless, constant data collection and searches because of the public-private partnership that exists. Because big companies collect all this data, they make their profit by selling your data. They not only sell it to advertisers, we hear about ad networks, they also sell it to governments. Not even just the American government, they sell it to foreign governments too. And when governments buy it, it's used for intelligence services, it's used for police operations, and it's even used for nefarious things in other countries like China, which again, oftentimes won't be sold to like Chinese intelligence, but if they sell it to a Chinese tech company or a Chinese advertisement company, because of Chinese law under the national security law, the CCP can access it. It's the same thing as the government getting it. In the United States, it's also now been shown to be semi-legal, where police or whatever else can just buy all this data. And so we do live under very much so an Orwellian surveillance state. Only the issue is it doesn't exist purely through government, it exists through public-private partnership. It's private companies working with them, which is an interesting state to be in, for better or for worse. You tell me if you think it's a good thing or a bad thing, because you do catch a lot of criminals legitimately with it too. Now, on another topic though, it looks like President Donald Trump is actually making a comeback in the polls right now. New York Post said this: President Donald Trump received some rare good polling news Monday as a new survey shows him with the highest approval rating since early fall. It's the poll of likely voters by Insider Advantage shows a 50% approval rating of the job Trump is doing, while 41% disapprove, with remaining 9% undecided. It's that Monday's results mark the highest raw approval rating for the president in an Insider Advantage survey since late September, when 52% of respondents approved of his performance. The 9 percentage point net approval rating for Trump is the highest since mid-August, when 54% gave Trump a positive rating and 44% gave him a negative approval rating, a spread of 10 percentage points. Now, why does this matter, right? On that point, take polling data with a grain of salt, but it is a little important. Let me explain why. There's easy ways to fumble numbers. In 2016, what was Donald Trump's polling data suggesting in terms of his ability to win over Hillary Clinton? I saw some polls at the time that were like 2%, right? Hillary Clinton, like 98% polling victory expected. You had magazines printing out, Hillary wins the election back in 2016. And she did not in the end. And that was, of course, because a lot of the polling companies were just massively wrong. Polling data can be easily skewed. Polling data can be messed with. And sometimes it's even used politically to disenfranchise voters and so on. But it actually is important right now on another point, though. So what's happening right now? One of the biggest narratives ongoing currently is the issue of affordability. Democrats leading into the midterm elections, because that's the next big step for us, right? Starting up all the campaigns very soon. They've found something very interesting with Mamdani and with the no oligarchy tour between AOC and Bernie Sanders. They've stopped talking about things like gender transitions for children and, DEI and ESG. They're not really talking about that as much. What are they now talking about? They're talking about the economy. They've gone back to the basics and realized if you want to win elections, you got to talk about what's in people's interests. What's in people's interests? Not crazy stuff. The most in their interest thing is typically, gee, can I afford groceries this month? Gee, I'd sure like to afford a house. Gee, I wish meat didn't cost so much. Gee, I'm in massive debt and I can barely afford to move. And they've realized this. They're going on what they call the affordability crisis. And, President Donald Trump is basically saying right now that you're not going to feel the impact of the changes he's made, the tariffs, the massive investments, the changes made to the medical system where Americans are now going to have to pay for all the, picking up the slack of Europe, basically, and subsidizing their medical industry. The changes in the way we pay for things, all of this, you're probably not going to feel it until around the midterms or just after. And so this is going to be the kind of next big battleground, is affordability, the economy, and Trump is moving very quickly on this front because the Republicans need to show that they've done something on that. And they have, actually. If you look at inflation, it's actually gone down quite a bit. A lot of the media has been extremely dishonest about it. But for the average person, the question is, do you feel it, right? Do you actually see it with your finances? Sure, gas has gone down. Groceries have actually gone down, but it's still pretty dang expensive. The Trump administration is alleging a large part of that is because of global price fixing. And they're even going after companies that have been doing it, even threatening, going after them for antitrust violations and things like that. So they're doing pretty big things to try to lower the prices of goods. But this is going to be the big cross, whatever side you want to go on, big debate for the upcoming elections. The midterms are going to be all about the economy. And on that point too, a lot of the opinion polls on this are going to reflect not only the views of Trump, but also the views on the economy. And that's effectively where things are at right now. All right, I said questions, comments, anything you want to talk about, leave it in the chat. Let's jump into some questions. And let's see here. Again, Merry Christmas Eve, everyone. I hope you have some good plans for the holidays. A lot going on. I'm going to go hang out with my dad later today, by the way. Let's see, Jen Reinbold, you're saying, with new businesses starting in the U.S. and government changes like ICE and Golden Fleet, are there not a bunch of jobs to be had? Why are all my liberal friends saying that unemployment is so high and the worst it has been in decades? Okay, so there's a few different things going on right now. Yes, jobs are returning to America. Yes, they are creating new jobs. Okay, so a lot of the new jobs being created under Trump, they're claiming it's all going to American citizens. The problem you've had for a long time under the Biden administration, they were creating jobs. Almost all the jobs were going to illegal aliens or migrants, right? And this has been the problem. Okay, so let me explain. We're coming out of a very odd time in history, the COVID lockdowns, right? The COVID lockdowns had a greater impact on American life, life of everybody, no matter where you are. than most people even realize. So what happened when there were COVID lockdowns? Well, a lot of the economy, like a lot of the businesses, the restaurants, the mom and pop shops, a lot of them shut down. You had a difference between essential services and non-essential services. A lot of your local stores were forced to close, and the companies that were allowed to stay open were the major corporations. So you could buy things on Amazon, but you couldn't go down to your local store and buy things. And so it basically collapsed a lot of the private industry and poured money into the big, box stores and so on, right? It created this massive imbalance, and kind of, because a lot of people went out of business, it kind of created a very strong monopoly. The other big thing you had happen is the manufacturing of new homes was briefly shut down. And because the manufacturing of homes was shut down, they told you, hey, lock down, stay in your home. And they were also allowing people coming by the tens of thousands every single day, every single week from every country on the face of the earth, just about. So while you had to lock in your home, they were allowing mass migration and then busing them into a town near you. What that meant was that while the construction of homes was not allowed to continue, the competition for existing properties was massively increased. And not only that, every one of those people were looking for jobs. They got the delivery jobs. How many of you have seen the Uber Eats drivers or the guys on bicycles? In New York and New Jersey, they're very common, who are mainly illegal aliens or, these temporary protection status migrants. Now, a lot of them get those jobs by committing fraud. They'll have somebody register the names, and then they'll sell that to the illegals, and that's how they do it. Although I was told by an Uber driver just over the weekend that some of these companies have begun forcing you to take a selfie to prove that you are the account holder, so they're starting to get rid of that. My point is, the existing jobs and the existing homes started seeing mass competition, and the creation of new jobs and new homes was effectively shut down because of COVID for a long time. And so if you have a finite number of homes and a finite number of jobs, and it massively increase the population by bringing in 10, 20, who knows how many million people. The low-end estimate under Biden alone was about 20 million that they flowed into the country, using your tax dollars, by the way. It was about 20 million. And it might be even more, we don't know. And if you break that down and you think, where did they all go? Well, geez, if you bring 10,000 people into a small town anywhere in the US, think about it, right? 20 million people is a lot. If you were to increase the number of people in an average area by 10,000 people, I'm not talking 100,000, just say 10,000, what's going to happen to the homes? If you have 10,000 people who suddenly need a home, and you go on, the internet and you find, hey, apartments near you, and you have 20 apartments up, and you have, let's say, even 500 people, and they're competing for those 20 apartments, what's going to happen to those apartments? The prices are going to go through the roof. If you go on a job search website and there's, let's say 200 jobs, there's a lot of jobs available, and you bring in 500 people, and I'd say 500 is a low estimate of what most even small communities in America experienced. If you suddenly have 500 people looking for jobs and 500 people looking for homes, what's going to happen to the jobs and homes? Well, on the statistics, it's going to look great. We created millions and millions of jobs. We created 10 million jobs. The economy's never been better. Prices of homes are going up. The housing market is doing well, as they would say. If you're a homeowner, great. It means your asset has increased in value. But it was an artificial inflation because of mass migration. So they have created jobs. You see what I mean? But they've also created mass employment. And this is the weird in-between we're dealing with. Both are actually true. Lots of employment was created. Huge amounts of employment was created. But a lot of unemployment was created. And these two seem contradictory. The reason is they brought in at least 20 million people. Okay? That's why. And they're deporting them very slowly, frankly. You know, they're doing good, but they're still deporting them pretty slowly. You take into account that there's a lot that are even unknown and understand what that means, right? Now, aside from that, there are other factors, the H-1B visas, the visas from other areas. There's been a lot of legal migration as well, and a lot of competition for a very finite number of resources that even in addition to being finite, were restricted because of COVID. The COVID lockdowns were such a massive enhancing feature to the restrictions on growth that even what would have normally been a detrimental inflow was made more detrimental because of the freeze on construction, the freeze on the creation of new jobs, the freeze on the building of new homes, and the freeze of basically the entire supporting structure you would need to be able to create the conditions to have that number of people come in and not make life incredibly hard for everybody. And so this is why, you know, when Trump's talking about the affordability crisis and saying that mass migration is an abuse of human rights, this is one of the big points they're making. The narrative from the Democrats versus the Republicans is on this front. Trump has noted inflation, while the media is saying inflation, I believe inflation at some points during the Biden administration was around 7%. If you look at the amount of American debt created under just the Biden administration, they just about doubled the debt, if I'm not mistaken. They increased the debt by insane amounts, which means you pay a lot of your tax dollars, even though they're collecting a lot of money is just going to pay the interest on debt. It's not going to your local school or your firehouse or building roads, which a lot of people say great. It's going to the people holding the debt. It's going to interest. We pay more on interest right now than we do for our entire defense budget. Let that sink in. We're paying the equivalent of the entire U.S. military, the largest in the world, the most powerful in the world, most expensive in the world, on interest. Okay? A lot of your money is doing nothing other than paying the people who were buying American debt. And it's been made worse because the Federal Reserve is increasing the interest rates, which increases the amount of money they can rob from you through usury. They're robbing you with usury, okay? Which, by the way, most religions used to restrict. Even Christianity used to be against the religion to engage in usury, to an extent. And so on that front, to answer your question, it's a bit of both. You also have a lot of fake jobs. A lot of companies post jobs that are not actual jobs. And they're doing it to make themselves look good, right? And some companies are posting jobs and then they're kind of doing illegal things by pretending they want to hire people and then just bringing in a bunch of H-1B visas and exporting the jobs to like India or something like that. There's a lot of that going on too. So it's a very weird state. We have both massive employment, an increase of employment, but also the creation of massive unemployment. And a lot of this goes down to the difference between foreign jobs and the mass influx of people and the exportation of jobs. Because remember also during COVID, work from home, remote work became more common, which also meant the globalization of a lot of jobs. A lot of jobs became remote work. Add to that AI. A lot of companies have started using AI and began firing people or not hiring people. And so it's more difficult to find jobs in voice acting, in graphic design, in film, in, like certain writing jobs are more difficult. Certain types of coding jobs are more difficult because a lot of people, One thing AI is actually very good at is coding, actually. And so a lot of these jobs, in addition to being outsourced, are being scooped up or eliminated entirely because of that. Now, I know this is a long answer, but one last point. The Trump plan to create employment is twofold. One, mass deportations. Two, or three, a fewfold. Mass deportations of illegal immigrants, the stripping of temporary protection status, the elimination of the ability of people to get subsidized housing, taxpayer-funded loans for homes, and other things that make it very difficult for them to live and work here, right? So they put a lot of pressure on not even just illegals, but non-citizens. It's actually more difficult for them right now. Even people who are just here on visas, the ability to stay here long-term and get a home is much more difficult for them now. They've also begun eliminating a lot of the H-1B visas and other programs, and they've also begun vetting people, and they're calling in a lot of people for additional interviews to see if you've been basically lying or defrauding us. And so that is happening. The other tier is that Trump is also trying to bring back American manufacturing. Part of the tariffs are to do that. The tariff threat to other countries is basically you can pay a lot more money to keep manufacturing stuff and sending it here, or you can build a factory here. And as they build the factories, that will create more jobs. America is going to start having a lot of factory jobs again. Some people don't like factory jobs. Keep in mind, a factory is not just, making shoes or whatever, or doing the thing like this where you have like the hose or whatever. It's not just that. A factory is logistics, it's the drivers. A factory is natural resources, miners, the lumber industry, everything. A factory and the factory system, the industrial base, is administrator jobs, it's communications, it's everything. A factory is everything. And it's the entire supply chain, going from the natural resources to the transportation of them, to the manufacturing, to the production, to the selling, to the transportation yet again, to the operation of the outlets and box stores and warehouses and running those, and right down to your mom and pop shop selling the goods. It's an entire ecosystem. The entire life force of an economic base is built around the factory. That's all coming back to America. But it takes a while. You're probably not going to see that for another year. Even that is going to be a quick timetable. I would say between the next year to 2 years, you're going to see a little bit of it. But within the next 1 to 2 years, you're going to start seeing the quality of life, in America at least, become significantly better. I really do think there's an economic boom, a very big one, coming in about 1 to 2 years for Americans. And so you're going to see a lot of jobs then, but it's going to be a bit rough between then and now. Also on the housing front, Trump announced that he's weighing declaring a national emergency on housing. And what that would do, if Trump declares an emergency, it means that he can basically get rid of a lot of red tape. All of the red tape that restricts the construction of new homes, they can just steamroll it and override it. The environmental protections, all the stupid policies, all that goes out the window. And they can begin building new homes very quickly if he does that. But he's not yet doing it. So we'll see. Because, from the other perspective, people my age, millennials, younger, a lot of us have accepted the idea that we'll probably never own homes, frankly. We can. It's not that dire, but it's expensive right now. A lot of us could not afford to buy a home in the places we grew up. I come from San Diego. Homes that used to be very affordable now cost in the upwards of like a couple $1 million or more. You're not going to be able to buy a home, at least not a good one. The problem you have with rapidly reducing home prices is that's what happened in 2008 with the housing bubble. It's great. Having lower prices of home is great for home buyers. Having lower prices of homes is great for just average people and so on. But if you're a homeowner or you're a massive investment firm like BlackRock and they buy a lot of properties, or you're a whatever, right? A big bank. A lot of it's owned by the banks, and you suddenly reduce the value of all those assets because homes are assets. You're going to watch just the annihilation of a lot of wealth. So, because you're going to devalue those investments. And so there are some people who don't want that. There are some people who do not want prices to go down. And so, there's a couple sides to it. Cassandra Olympiad, you're saying, many of the illegals in the USA are streaming into Canada, even green card holders on the FBI most wanted list. And why not? They got a new ID right away and citizenship soon after. Yeah, so there were some reports on this in Canada. I did see this. There were some accusations in Canada that basically signing up for effectively what used to be the system of migration here, where you just fill out a form. You basically just fill out a form and they give you like, not citizenship, but the ability to stay in Canada. And it is true. A lot of people who can't stay in America, they're going to Canada. Even some of these semi-legitimate ones, I know people like this. I know some people who were here, because they were fleeing persecution. They're probably going to Canada if they can't stay here. And it is the reality. Canada is also facing this problem. Canada has been trying to clamp down on mass migration because Canada's red tape on new constructions of homes is much worse than America. They have a much more finite number of homes, and migration, foreign purchases of homes, and the whole 9 yards has made the quality of life in Canada very horrible. It's very hard for people to afford to live in Canada right now. And Cassandra, you're right. I've seen a lot of the reports on this too. A lot of them are going to Canada. And I should note too that if Trump does not fully solve this issue in due time, as soon as he's out of office, or as soon as a Republican is we'll see if it's continued. I think J.D. Vance might run. We'll see who else runs. But as soon as Republicans are out of office, there is a chance it could be turned back on. As I mentioned previously, the facilitation of illegal mass migration was a globally regulated process, heavily coordinated through the United Nations, through the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration. And that is still operating. Canada is still doing it to an extent. We've stopped a little bit. Europe is still doing it on a mass scale. Even the boats going in, which by the way are run by NGOs, same as the buses coming to the US. It's the same system. That entire global system is still in place. It's not gone. They're just not coming to America. That's the only difference. It's still on for most of the rest of the world. It's still happening. It's still in place. It's still being funded. It's still being run. And if it's not gotten rid of, as soon as the Republicans are out of office, it's probably going to come back. It's probably going to come back, unless it's fully stopped somehow. Ashley from California, you're saying, it's the privacy policies you agreed to that allows Google and the other companies to do what they want with your info. Yeah, and it's a challenge. So, I mean, this is okay, so we're talking about your Google search data usable by law enforcement. And again, there are some great things for this. Have any of you ever seen the type of data normal police, I'm not talking like special agent type stuff, normal police can access on their terminals, their laptops? It's incredible, actually. If you, on a normal police identity search system, type in someone's name, what do you get? You get their name, home address, you get their emails that they've registered, you get their online aliases, all the screen names you've created for yourself is documented. All your aliases are documented. Your foot traffic, your geolocation data would be included on there. All this stuff's included. Your phone pings, all that stuff. And so, a lot of your online data can be accessed to an extent. And a lot of that, again, you could say, well, how do they get that? Well, they get it because they buy it. It's part of the big charade. The Constitution technically protects us against that, but the caveat with that is the Constitution protects you from the government doing it. The Constitution does not protect you from private businesses doing it, especially not when you allow them to do it. So when you download an app on your phone and it brings up the terms and services and it sends you, I don't know, like a 100-page document and you're like, agree, didn't read, agree. You agree to let them do whatever the heck is in there. And sometimes it's really, really crazy stuff you agree to. If you really break down the terms of services and so on some of these contracts, and they are legal contracts, you're technically signing, they allow for stuff you wouldn't believe. Like the amount of data sharing and collection you agree to is insane. The challenge we have though, I face this problem, I'm sure almost all of you face this problem. So much of the modern world is built on the foundation of big tech that you can't get around it. If you want to have a job and you don't have an email, you want to have a job and you don't have a cell phone because your cell phone scoops up tons of data on you. You want to have a job and you didn't install Windows or a computer, you don't have, you use Linux in a stripped down version that has all the privacy features turned off. You don't have a web browser. You don't use search engines because all of them, with the exception of like barely, I think Ganjing browser does, or Ganjing search, which, we've done partnerships with. I think aside from them, I think they all collect your stuff. Every web browser collects your data. Every search engine, for the most part, collects your data. Everything. Your online purchases, everything. And so if you try to live life without any of that, your options are going to be very limited. You're going to have a very time functioning in society. And so it is a problem. Modern life and the expectations and requirements of modern life are built on a foundation of private companies that require you to surrender a huge part of your individual sovereignty and your privacy. And because this has become the foundation of modern life, they sell that data and governments buy it. So by extension of what is necessary for you to live normally, we've effectively begun living in a mass surveillance state, for better or for worse. And that is the reality of it. Now, some of that can be used in more nefarious ways. We saw under the Biden administration the mass censorship, the targeting of individuals for online speech, things that could have gotten people debanked, the expressing of political opinions that would get you searched or monitored. The designation of parents is effectively being terrorists if you went to your student board meetings. The redefinition of what radicalism was, where if you were a MAGA extremist, you might have been deemed a radical. We did see very extreme abuses using this type of data for monitoring. The redefinition of radicalism, targeting patriotic Americans. But on the other side of it, you also see that police can use it for very good reasons. Catching murderers, catching rapists, catching people violating those crimes. And so it does have good real-world applications. I've mentioned before, though, there's a sliding scale between privacy and security. I'd say there's even a sliding scale between security and freedom. The more you have of one, the less you're going to have of the other. Typically, part of the social contract, right, what they call the social contract, is you have to sacrifice a bit of your rights to even have government. That is part of the social contract we all agree to through, maybe not agree to all the time, but that we live under, right? The normal form of human society. We surrender a certain amount of our individual sovereignty to have the protection of certain systems, to have a guarantee of a police force, of a firefighting force, of a basic form of education to form the basis of modern society, to make sure that roving gangs don't kill you in your sleep at night, hopefully. All of the, and to have systems that would punish them if they do. All of that comes with a bit of sacrifice of your individual sovereignty, which is the basis of law and the basis of government. But there are different degrees to that, and very extreme security comes with a very extreme sacrifice of freedom and a very extreme sacrifice of privacy. So I don't know, what do you all think? How much should we sacrifice freedom and privacy for the sake of security? Do you think the risks of potential surveillance and censorship are worth it to have systems that can more rapidly find murderers or kidnappers or rapists? Which is a good argument, right? What degree of individual privacy and freedom are you willing to sacrifice for the sake of again, security? To what degree are you willing to sacrifice that? What is the proper balance between freedom and safety and privacy and security? You tell me. That said, Merry Christmas, everybody. It's Christmas Eve today, so enjoy the holiday. Enjoy time with your families. Thank you all so much for being here. Happy Hanukkah, too, for those of you out there. Thank you so much for being here, as always. I'm not going to have an episode tomorrow because it's Christmas, and I'll be hanging out with family, and I hope you will, too. I'll see you again on Monday, and until then, thank you so much for being here. Please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.